Take a moment to feel the hum of tires beneath you as you drive down a modern highway. What if I told you that beneath those layers of asphalt, hidden in plain sight, lies the ghostly imprint of roads built thousands of years ago? Roads that carried emperors, merchants, and armies across continents, their foundations so sturdy they still shape the paths we take today. This isn't just about pavement or shortcuts. It's about how the ancient world engineered the veins of civilization, and how those same designs echo beneath our feet every time we step into a car or walk down a city street. Think about it. The highways you use, the trade routes that deliver your packages, even the way your city is laid out, all of them owe a debt to engineers who worked with stone, sweat, and sheer ingenuity centuries before the first car was ever invented. From the legendary Appian way of Rome, with its perfectly straight lines and drainage systems that still baffle modern builders, to the dizzying mountain paths of the Inca, carved into cliffs without the use of wheels or iron, these weren't just roads. They were statements about power, about connection, about the unshakable human need to reach beyond the horizon. And here's the wildest part. Many of these ancient routes didn't just vanish. They evolved, they were buried, repurposed, or simply built over, their bones still holding up the infrastructure of our daily lives. Ever driven through a city and wondered why the main street curves in such an odd way? Chances are it's following the path of a Roman supply route or a medieval trade trail. So buckle up, because we're about to take a trip through time, tracing the hidden fingerprints of history on the roads we take for granted. We'll unravel how the Silk Road's web of commerce became the blueprint for today's global shipping networks, how the Persians invented the first postal system with relay stations that inspired modern couriers, and how ancient water management tricks are still saving cities from floods. By the end, you'll never look at a highway exit or a sidewalk the same way again, because roads, they're more than just concrete and paint. They're the silent storytellers of human ambition, and their tale is far from over. Ready to uncover the secrets beneath your wheels? Let's go. Picture a world without highways, without the hum of traffic or the rhythm of daily commutes, just dirt trails winding through wilderness. Now step back in time to the very first civilizations that refused to accept those limits. The Romans didn't just build roads, they built an empire on them. Their engineers didn't lay down simple paths, they constructed layered masterpieces, starting with a trench dug deep into the earth, filled with crushed stone for drainage, then packed sand, and finally topped with interlocking stones angled to shed rainwater. This wasn't just construction, it was an obsession with permanence, and it worked. Some of these roads still exist today, 2,000 years later, buried under modern streets like silent blueprints. But Rome wasn't alone in this revolution. Over in Persia, the Royal Road stretched over 1,500 miles, with relay stations every 15 miles where fresh horses waited to carry messages at staggering speed. This wasn't just about transportation, it was about control, about binding a sprawling empire together with threads of gravel and discipline. Meanwhile, in the Andes, the Inca achieved the impossible without wheels or iron, carving 25,000 miles of roads through sheer mountain cliffs. They built suspension bridges from woven grass that swayed over deadly drops and stepped terraces to prevent erosion. Solutions so ingenious they're studied by engineers today. What's astonishing isn't just the scale, but the purpose. These weren't random paths, they were calculated lifelines. Roman roads marched straight as arrows to move legions swiftly. Persian couriers raced along their routes to deliver imperial decrees. Inca runners carried fish from the coast to the highlands faster than modern refrigeration could. Every curve, every material choice was a calculated decision. one that still whispers to us through modern infrastructure. Next time you're stuck in traffic, look down. That asphalt, it's just the latest layer in a conversation that began millennia ago. The Appian Way wasn't just a road, it was a revolution in motion, stretching from Rome to the port city of Brindisi. This marvel of engineering wasn't built for leisurely strolls. It was a military superhighway designed to move legions at breakneck speed. Picture this, a road so straight, so meticulously elevated, that rainwater would cascade off its surface like a modern freeway. Roman engineers didn't just lay stones, they sculpted the land itself, cutting through hills and bridging marshes to maintain that unwavering line, their secret. A multi-layered foundation that would make today's construction crews nod in respect. First, a trench dug deep into the earth, packed with large stones for stability. Then a middle layer of smaller gravel mixed with mortar, acting like ancient concrete. Finally, a surface of interlocking volcanic rocks, angled slightly outward to channel water into ditches flanking the road. Sound familiar? It should. This is the same basic principle behind modern asphalt roads with their cambered surfaces and drainage systems. But the brilliance didn't stop there. The Romans understood that roads were more than just paths, they were lifelines of empire. Every mile marker, every roadside inn, every bridge was a calculated piece of a vast network designed to bind distant provinces to the heart of Rome. Those iconic straight lines weren't just about efficiency, they were psychological masterstrokes. A soldier marching for days on a perfectly straight road could see nothing but Rome ahead, a constant reminder of where loyalty lay. Even the materials told a story. Romans used local volcanic rock, crushed pottery, and lime mortar, adapting to each region's resources just as today's engineers tailor materials to local climates. And then there's the phrase we've all heard, all roads lead to Rome. It wasn't just poetic flair, it was geographical reality. The empire's road system radiated from the capital like spokes on a wheel, a design so effective that modern cities still use radial road patterns for efficient traffic flow. When you're stuck in traffic on a highway that seems to arrow straight into a downtown skyline, you're experiencing a 2,000-year-old urban planning trick. The Romans even had their own version of rest stop stations called mutations where travelers could swap horses or repair carts, not unlike today's service plazas. What's truly astonishing is how these ancient innovations persist. Next time you drive past a highway construction site, watch how crews layer gravel before pouring asphalt. It's the same staggered approach the Romans perfected. Or notice how modern interstates avoid sharp curves, prioritizing speed and safety just as Roman surveyors did. Even the challenges they faced, erosion, flooding, heavy loads, are the very problems modern engineers still grapple with. The Appian Way wasn't just a road, it was a prototype, a blueprint whispered across centuries to the pavement beneath your tires. The Silk Road was never just about silk, it was the internet of the ancient world, a sprawling network of ideas, inventions, and ambitions woven across continents. Picture a caravan of camels laden with spices from India, Persian silverware, and Chinese porcelain, trudging through mountain passes where the air was so thin it made your head spin. But this wasn't a single, defined path. It was a fluid web of routes shifting with politics, weather, and bandit activity. Merchants didn't just follow a map, they navigated a living, breathing system of trails, oasis towns, and mountain shortcuts, each stop a chance to trade, rest, or overhear rumors of safer paths ahead. What made the Silk Road revolutionary wasn't just the goods it moved, but the invisible infrastructure that supported them. Caravanserais, fortified inns spaced a day's journey apart, offered shelter, fresh camels, and even repair services for wagons. Think of them as ancient truck stops, complete with security guards to fend off raiders. These hubs didn't just facilitate trade, they sprouted into cities like Samarkand and Bukhara, where languages, religions, and technologies collided. A Persian merchant might bargain with a Chinese silk trader using Byzantine coins, while a Sogdian interpreter translated, as seen as cosmopolitan as any modern shipping port. The Silk Road's influence on today's world is startlingly direct. Modern logistics giants like FedEx or Maersk operate on the same principle: secure, reliable routes with strategically placed hubs. Even the concept of customs checks has ancient roots. Caravans passing through Dunhuang on China's frontier faced rigorous inspections, their goods taxed and documented on bamboo slips. And just as Silk Road merchants hedged risks by splitting cargo across multiple caravans, today's supply chains diversify shipping routes to avoid bottlenecks. Perhaps most enduring was the cultural alchemy this network sparked. Paper-making traveled west from China, revolutionizing record-keeping in Baghdad. Buddhism rode east from India, morphing into new forms as it absorbed local beliefs. Even culinary traditions blended. Central Asian noodles eventually became Italian pasta. This wasn't just trade, it was globalization's first draft, proving that roads don't just carry goods, they dissolve barriers. The legacy is etched into modern geography. The Belt and Road Initiative, China's massive infrastructure project, consciously mirrors the Silk Road's vision of transcontinental connectivity. Ancient trading posts like Istanbul and Xi'an remain economic powerhouses, their streets echoing with the same multilingual buzz that once filled caravanserai courtyards. Next time you order something online and track its journey across warehouses and borders, remember you're participating in a system that's been evolving for over 2,000 years. The camels have been replaced by container ships, but the human drive to connect, to exchange, to reach beyond horizons, that's as old as the dust on a Silk Road trader's boots. The Inca road system was a triumph of human ingenuity over impossible terrain, 25,000 miles of pathways, threading through some of the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth. Imagine standing on a narrow stone ledge carved into a sheer Andean cliff face, with nothing but a chasm yawning below. Now picture doing that without iron tools, without wheels, without even the concept of the wheel. That's what Inca engineers accomplished, turning mountains into highways and ravines into crossings with nothing but stone hammers, woven ropes, and an intimate understanding of their environment. Their roads weren't just functional, they were adaptive masterpieces. In steep slopes, they built staircases of stone, each step precisely leveled to prevent slips. Where rivers cut through valleys, they strung suspension bridges made of iku grass, fibers twisted into cables thicker than a man's torso, capable of supporting armies and llama caravans. These bridges swayed with the wind, bending but never breaking, a design so resilient that some were still in use centuries after the Inca Empire fell. Modern engineers studying these structures have found their flexibility mirrors principles used in earthquake-resistant bridges today, but perhaps their most enduring innovation was erosion control. The Inca didn't fight the land, they worked with it. Terraces carved into hillsides redirected water runoff, while drainage channels beneath road surfaces kept pathways dry during torrential rains. In a world increasingly threatened by climate-driven landslides, these ancient techniques are being revisited. Peru's modern highway crews now use stepped embankments and stone retaining walls, direct descendants of Inca methods, to stabilize roads in the Andes. What's even more remarkable is how these roads bound an empire together. Runners called chasquis relayed messages at a pace that could outdistance a horse, sprinting between way stations stocked with fresh supplies. A fish caught at dawn on the Pacific coast could reach the emperor's table in Cusco, high in the mountains before it spoiled, an early version of express delivery. This network wasn't just about transportation. It was about control, communication, and unity across an empire that stretched from jungle to desert. Today, as engineers grapple with melting permafrost and crumbling coastal highways, the Incas' lessons feel urgently relevant. Their roads didn't just conquer geography, they respected it, bending to the land rather than forcing the land to bend to them. That's a philosophy modern infrastructure could learn from, especially as climate change redraws the maps we once took for granted. The next time you see a highway hugging a mountainside or a bridge leaping across a gorge, remember, the Inca were there first, proving that the impossible is just another engineering challenge waiting to be solved. Darius I didn't just build a road, he built an ancient superhighway for information. The Persian Royal Road stretched over 1,500 miles, from the bustling capital of Susa to the distant city of Sardis, and it wasn't just about moving people or goods. It was about speed, the kind of speed that could make or break an empire. Picture a messenger sprinting into a relay station, leaping off a sweat-drenched horse and onto a fresh one in seconds, a satchel of urgent scrolls strapped to his back. These stations, spaced precisely a day's ride apart, were the beating heart of the system, allowing dispatches to cover the entire route in just 7 days. To put that in perspective, the same journey would take a typical caravan 3 grueling months. This wasn't just logistics, it was a revolution in control. Darius understood that ruling a vast empire meant mastering the flow of information. His messengers, known as Angarian, weren't just delivering mail. They were the ancient equivalent of a high-speed data network, carrying everything from tax records to military orders. The system was so efficient that Herodotus, the Greek historian, marveled at its precision, writing, "Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds." Sound familiar? That phrase later became the unofficial motto of the United States Postal Service, a direct nod to Persia's pioneering spirit, but the Royal Road's genius lay in its details. Each relay station wasn't just a pit stop, it was a meticulously stocked hub with fresh horses, food, and even backup riders in case of emergencies. The Persians even developed a kind of ancient express lane, prioritizing urgent messages with a system of signal fires and smoke towers that could relay simple warnings faster than any horse. It was a prototype for modern communication networks where speed and reliability are everything. The echoes of this system are everywhere today. FedEx's overnight deliveries, Amazon's sprawling fulfillment centers, even the way emergency dispatches are prioritized. All of them trace a lineage back to Darius's vision. The Royal Road proved something revolutionary. That infrastructure isn't just about physical movement. It's about shrinking time and space, collapsing distances so that an empire or a modern economy can function as a single, cohesive unit. Next time you track a package in real time or receive a next-day delivery, remember, the Persians were doing the same thing 2,500 years ago, just with horses instead of trucks and clay tablets instead of tracking numbers. What's truly remarkable is how the Royal Road's design principles persist. Modern courier services still use hub and spoke distribution models, mirroring Persia's relay stations. Even the challenges Darius faced, bandits, weather delays, maintenance, are the same ones logistics companies grapple with today. The solutions might look different, drones instead of dispatch riders, asphalt instead of packed earth, but the core idea remains unchanged. To rule, to trade, to connect, you must first master the art of moving information faster than anyone thought possible. The Persians didn't just build a road, they built the first nervous system of an empire, and its pulse still thrums beneath our globalized world. The roads beneath our feet tell a story of trial, error, and ingenuity, a story written in stone, mortar, and volcanic ash. Ancient engineers didn't have laboratories or synthetic materials. They had observation, necessity, and an uncanny ability to turn local resources into enduring solutions. Take Roman pozzolana, a volcanic sand mixed with lime to create a cement that could harden underwater. This wasn't just a happy accident. It was a deliberate innovation born from watching how certain volcanic deposits reacted with water. Fast forward 2,000 years, and modern hydraulic concrete uses the same principle, allowing engineers to build bridges and seawalls that set in tidal zones. The Romans didn't just leave us roads, they left us a recipe for resilience. But pozzolana was just one tool in an ancient materials toolkit that reads like a modern engineer's wish list. The Inca, lacking mortar, fit stone blocks together with such precision that a knife blade couldn't slip between them, a technique called ashlar masonry that stabilized structures against earthquakes. Today, seismic engineers study these joints to improve earthquake-resistant designs. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, builders mixed bitumen, a natural tar, with reeds to create waterproof flooring, an early ancestor of today's asphalt. Even cobblestones, those bumpy relics of medieval streets, were a clever response to wear and tear. Their rounded surfaces dispersed wagon weight better than flat stones, preventing ruts. Modern pavers now use a similar logic with interlocking designs that distribute traffic loads. What's striking isn't just the creativity of these solutions, but their sustainability. Ancient builders worked with what the land offered. The Romans used local volcanic rock. The Inca harvested nearby limestone. Persian engineers compacted desert gravel with clay. There was no one-size-fits-all approach, just a deep respect for regional materials. That lesson is echoing loudly today as researchers hunt for low-carbon alternatives to modern asphalt, which relies on energy-intensive bitumen. Some are revisiting ancient recipes, blending lime with industrial byproducts like fly ash to create green concrete. Others are testing Roman-style pozzolanic mixes using volcanic ash from current eruptions. The real magic lies in how these ancient materials performed over centuries. Modern lab tests reveal that Roman concrete, far from being primitive, actually self-heals. Tiny cracks allow water to seep in, reacting with leftover lime to form new mineral deposits that glue fractures back together. Scientists are now replicating this process with embedded bacteria that produce limestone when exposed to moisture, a literal living concrete. It's a reminder that durability isn't just about strength, it's about adaptability. Perhaps the most humbling realization is how much ancient builders achieved without fossil fuels or heavy machinery. The Great Trunk Road of India, stretching over 1,500 miles, was paved with iron slag, a byproduct of local smelting centuries before modern roads recycled industrial waste. The Mayans mixed tree sap with limestone to create a flexible, crack-resistant plaster still intact on pyramids today. These weren't just functional choices, they were collaborations with the environment, a dialogue modern infrastructure is only now relearning. As we face crumbling bridges and climate-stressed highways, the past offers more than nostalgia, it offers prototypes. The next time you drive over a pothole-free stretch of road, consider this. Beneath those layers of modern engineering might just lie the ghost of an ancient idea waiting to be rediscovered. Alexander the Great didn't just conquer territories, he conquered distance. His secret weapon wasn't just the phalanx or the cavalry. It was the relentless network of roads he built or repurposed to keep his armies moving at breathtaking speed. Picture this, a force of 40,000 men, horses, and siege engines covering up to 20 miles a day, a pace that would strain modern infantry. How? By commandeering existing Persian Royal Roads, then expanding them into arrow-straight military corridors. These weren't just paths, they were strategic lifelines, paved with crushed stone to prevent muddy delays, wide enough for 8 soldiers to march abreast, and dotted with supply depots precisely spaced to keep troops fed and armed. When Alexander crossed the Hindu Kush into India, his engineers carved steps into mountain passes and built temporary bridges, logistics tricks still used by NATO forces in rugged terrain today. Genghis Khan took this concept even further. His Mongol hordes relied on a web of grassland trails that functioned like ancient interstate highways, allowing horsemen to surge across continents with terrifying mobility. But here's the twist: the Mongols didn't just use roads, they weaponized them. Scouts mapped every spring and grazing spot along routes, enabling armies to travel light and fast. Relay stations with fresh horses spaced every 25 miles meant messages could race across the empire at 200 miles a day, faster than the Pony Express. This wasn't just about speed, it was about psychological dominance. The ability to appear without warning, strike, and vanish made Mongol roads as much a tool of terror as of transport. Flash forward to the modern era, and the military logic remains eerily similar. Eisenhower's U.S. interstate system was literally sold to Congress as essential for national defense, with straight sections designed to double as emergency airstrips. During the Cold War, West Germany's Autobahn network included hidden tank ramps and camouflaged fuel depots. Even today, China's military-civilian dual-use highways incorporate reinforced bridges capable of bearing missile transporters. The ancient and modern worlds share a stark realization. Roads don't just connect cities, they project power, but the duality of roads cuts both ways. Roman legions paved the way for trade even as they marched to war. The same highways that carried Mongol invaders later ferried Marco Polo's silks and spices. This paradox lives on in places like the Afghanistan Ring Road, built by the U.S. military for counterinsurgency, now vital for civilian commerce. History keeps teaching the same lesson: control the roads and you control the fate of empires. Whether it's Alexander's supply lines or today's satellite-guided convoys, the battleground has always been as much about pavement as it is about payloads. Petra wasn't just a city, it was a masterclass in economic alchemy. Carved into rose-red cliffs at the crossroads of Arabian incense routes and Mediterranean spice trails, this desert metropolis thrived by turning geography into gold. Picture a narrow canyon called the Sikh, its towering walls funneling caravans of camels laden with frankincense and myrrh straight into Petra's heart. Here, Nabatean merchants didn't just sell goods, they sold scarcity. They taxed every bale of silk that passed through, stored monsoon season rainwater in ingenious cisterns to resell to thirsty travelers, and even manipulated supply by controlling secret desert wells. This wasn't just trade, it was economic theater, with Petra as the stage and every road leading to it a carefully managed entrance. Half a world away, Samarkand pulsed with similar energy. Where the Silk Road's northern and southern branches converged, this Uzbek oasis became a melting pot of currencies, languages, and luxuries. Sogdian traders, the ancient equivalent of Wall Street brokers, developed early forms of letters of credit to avoid hauling coins across bandit-infested steppes. Bazaars sprawled along the city's main artery, where a single street might host Persian carpets, Chinese lacquerware, and Baltic amber in dizzying succession. The real genius, Samarkand's rulers didn't just allow this chaos, they curated it. Tax incentives lured merchants from rival routes, while state-funded caravanserais offered free lodging to high-volume traders. Sound familiar? It's the same playbook modern free trade zones use, from Dubai's Jebel Ali to Singapore's ports. The magic of these hubs lay in their transformation of movement into permanence. Roads didn't just connect places, they created places. Take Palmyra, another desert marvel whose ruins still whisper of its heyday. What began as a pit stop for weary camels evolved into a skyline of colonnaded streets and towering temples, all funded by taxing the flow of Indian pearls and Roman glass. Modern cities follow the same blueprint. Think of how Atlanta grew from a railroad junction, or how Memphis became America's distribution capital thanks to interstate highways and FedEx's hub. Today's global supply chains are just digital age versions of these ancient networks. The spices that once took months to travel from Malabar to Venice now fly overnight, but the economic principles haven't changed. Amazon's fulfillment centers, their high-tech caravanserais, strategically placed where highways and airports intersect, the blockchain tracking your online order. A high-speed descendant of the clay tablets Mesopotamian merchants used to record shipments. Even the challenges tariffs, piracy, supply disruptions are echoes of ancient struggles. When container ships wait off congested ports, they're replaying the same dramas as Phoenician galleys queuing at Tyre's harbor. Perhaps the most enduring legacy is how these routes shaped not just economies but identities. The foods, fashions, and faiths that crisscrossed along ancient roads became the DNA of civilizations. That kebab sizzling on a New York food truck, its recipe traveled the Silk Road. The blue and white porcelain in a London antique shop, a descendant of Yuan dynasty exports. Roads didn't just move goods, they dissolved borders long before the term globalization existed. The next time you swipe a credit card or track a package on your phone, remember, you're part of a story that began with dust-covered merchants haggling under desert stars, their camels tethered beside the very roads that would one day pave the world. Roman engineers didn't just build roads, they built water-wrangling masterpieces. Those iconic cambered surfaces, slightly arched like a turtle's shell, weren't just for show. They were precision instruments designed to send rainwater cascading into flanking ditches, keeping the roadbed dry and stable. But here's the real genius. Those ditches didn't just dump water randomly. They fed into larger stone-lined channels called cloacae, directing runoff to nearby rivers or reservoirs, an ancient version of modern stormwater management. In cities like Pompeii, archaeologists have found gutters so well preserved you could drop a marble down them today and watch it roll smoothly to the nearest drain. The Romans treated water as both ally and adversary. In wet regions, they layered roads with permeable crushed stone to prevent pooling, while in arid zones, they designed shallow depressions to capture precious rainfall for travelers and livestock. Their most ingenious trick, subsurface drainage. Beneath many roads, they buried perforated clay pipes that wicked away groundwater like invisible sponges, preventing frost heave in winter and dust bowls in summer. Modern highway engineers still use this concept with geotextile fabrics and perforated PVC pipes under frost-prone interstates. But water management wasn't just a Roman obsession. Halfway across the world, the Maya built raised causeways called sakbiab through swamps, their steep sides channeling floodwaters while keeping the limestone-paved surfaces bone-dry. In monsoon-drenched Sri Lanka, ancient builders crowned roads with concave stone slabs that funneled rain into carved spouts, filling roadside tanks for elephants and traders. These weren't just functional designs, they were dialogues with local climates, tailored solutions born from centuries of watching how water moved across landscapes. The lesson for modern infrastructure is startlingly clear. When Hurricane Sandy submerged New York's subway tunnels, or when floods crippled Germany's Autobahns in 2021, the failures often traced back to ignoring ancient wisdom. Rotterdam's modern water squares are plazas that transform into temporary reservoirs during heavy rain, are direct descendants of Rome's public cisterns. Tokyo's massive underground flood tunnels echo the qanats of Persia, which silently diverted mountain runoff for millennia. The past keeps whispering a truth we're only now relearning: fight water and you'll lose. Work with it and your roads might outlast empires. Empires rise and fall, but their roads often refuse to disappear. When Rome collapsed, its legendary highways didn't vanish. They simply slipped into a quiet afterlife. Medieval pilgrims trudging to Canterbury or Santiago de Compostela unknowingly walked on Roman pavement stones worn smooth by centuries of sandals and wagon wheels. These travelers weren't just following faith, they were retracing the ghostly imprint of imperial supply routes, their footfalls echoing along roads that still knew the way. Even the famous Via Francigena, the medieval pilgrimage route from England to Rome, was essentially a patchwork of repurposed Roman roads stitched together by time and necessity. Archaeologists have uncovered layers of this road resurrection all across Europe. In Britain, the Fosseway, once a Roman military corridor, became a vital medieval trade route, its straight lines cutting through forests that had regrown after the empire's retreat. Local farmers pillaged its stone blocks for cottage foundations, while kings commandeered its intact stretches for royal progresses. The same pattern repeated from Gaul to Greece. Roman roads became the skeletal framework for medieval travel, their original purpose forgotten but their utility undeniable. But the rediscovery wasn't just medieval. 18th century engineers surveying routes for new turnpikes often found themselves inadvertently tracing Roman surveys. In some cases, they discovered that new roads they'd mapped were actually ancient ones buried under centuries of dirt, their original foundations still intact beneath overgrown hedgerows. This wasn't coincidence, it was testament to how brilliantly Roman engineers had chosen their paths. The same geographic logic that made a route ideal for legionnaires made it equally sensible for stagecoaches or, later, automobiles. The revival wasn't limited to Europe. In the Andes, Spanish conquistadors marveled at the Inca highway system, roads so well built they became the backbone of colonial supply chains. Modern hikers on the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu are walking on original stone steps laid 500 years ago, their surfaces polished smooth by generations of feet. Even the Silk Road, though fragmented by time and politics, found new life as 20th century archaeologists retraced its path using ancient merchant accounts and satellite imagery. Today's travelers unknowingly participate in this ancient continuity. The Autostrada del Sole in Italy follows the route of the Via Flaminia. Germany's Bundesstraße 1 mirrors the medieval Hellweg, which itself traced a Roman military road. In Jordan, the modern desert highway parallels the King's Highway, a trade route mentioned in the Bible. These roads aren't just transport corridors, they're palimpsests, layers of human movement etched into the landscape. The most poetic resurrection might be in tourism. Walk the Appian Way today, and you'll pass cyclists, joggers, and Instagrammers posing among ancient tombs, a far cry from legionnaires and chariots, yet still part of the road's unbroken story. The stones have borne emperors, pilgrims, and now sneaker-clad visitors, each era finding its own purpose for paths that stubbornly refuse to fade. Perhaps that's the ultimate lesson. Great infrastructure transcends its creators, becoming a stage where history keeps rewriting itself. The fall of Rome didn't just topple an empire, it unraveled the very threads that held Europe together. Imagine a continent where once straight highways, meticulously maintained for centuries, slowly vanished beneath weeds and mud. Without the empire's engineers to repair them or legions to patrol them, those legendary Roman roads began to crack and crumble, their stones pilfered for village walls or swallowed by encroaching forests. What remained were fragmented trails, often impassable in winter, turning regions that had once been tightly connected into isolated pockets of survival. A journey from Paris to Rome, which might have taken a Roman courier 3 weeks, now stretched into months of treacherous travel through bandit-haunted woods and crumbling bridges. Europe didn't just lose roads, it lost its circulatory system. This fragmentation reshaped society in ways still visible today. Trade dwindled to local barter, with luxuries like Mediterranean wine or Syrian glass becoming rare treasures. Towns that had thrived as way stations along Roman routes withered into obscurity, while new settlements clustered around defensible hills or river crossings. Even language-fractured Latin splintered into regional dialects that would one day become French, Spanish, and Italian. The lesson was stark: when roads decay, so does the flow of goods, ideas, and unity. Yet amid this disintegration, flickers of innovation emerged. Medieval travelers adapted to the broken landscape by developing new techniques. Pack animals replaced heavy wagons on narrow trails. Monastic orders like the Cistercians became unexpected infrastructure custodians, maintaining critical bridge crossings as acts of charity. And in places like the Alpine passes, local communities banded together to keep trade routes open, charging tolls that foreshadowed modern highway taxes. These weren't just practical fixes, they were the seeds of a new order, one where maintenance became a communal responsibility rather than an imperial mandate. The parallels to modern vulnerabilities are impossible to ignore. When Hurricane Katrina severed bridges in New Orleans, or when war damages highways in conflict zones, the same fragmentation occurs. Supply chains snap, prices soar, and communities retreat into isolation. Medieval Europe's story warns us that infrastructure isn't just about convenience, it's the bedrock of collective survival. Those crumbling Roman roads didn't just vanish, they left a void that took centuries to fill, proving that connectivity isn't a luxury. It's the glue that holds civilizations together. By the 18th century, Europe's roads had become a muddy, rutted shadow of their Roman ancestors, until a revolution rolled in on wagon wheels. Enter the Turnpike Trusts, a bold experiment that would breathe new life into transportation. Picture this: a group of local investors pooling funds to repair a stretch of highway, then recouping their costs by charging travelers a few pence at a gated toll house, the Turnpike that gave the system its name. This wasn't just about fixing potholes. It was capitalism meets cobblestones, a public-private partnership centuries before the term existed. The genius of the Turnpike model lay in its incentives. Unlike medieval roads maintained through forced labor or haphazard charity, these trusts turned road upkeep into a profitable enterprise. Better surfaces meant more traffic, which meant more toll revenue to fund further improvements, a virtuous cycle that transformed journeys. Where once a wagon might take 3 days to lumber between London and Birmingham, turnpikes cut the trip to a single day. Stagecoach companies, smelling opportunity, began running regular schedules with advertised departure times, effectively inventing the modern bus route. The very rhythm of commerce quickened, with fresh fish reaching inland markets overnight and newspapers circulating faster than gossip. But the turnpike boom wasn't just a British phenomenon. In America, pioneers like the Lancaster Turnpike in Pennsylvania proved that smooth roads could unlock frontier wealth, carrying Conestoga wagons loaded with grain to Philadelphia's docks. France's Cours des Ponts et Chaussées, the world's first civil engineering school, perfected techniques for grading and drainage that still underpin road construction today. Everywhere, the same pattern emerged: Where toll roads went, prosperity followed. Taverns, blacksmith shops, and markets sprouted like mushrooms along these revived routes, their economies fueled by the steady stream of passing trade. The echoes of this 18th century revolution are everywhere in our modern world, those electronic toll gantries flashing overhead on your daily commute. Direct descendants of the Turnpike keeper's wooden gate, the debate over privatizing infrastructure, the trusts tried it first with mixed results. Some became notorious for lining pockets while neglecting repairs, a cautionary tale for today's public-private partnerships. Even the word highway owes its modern meaning to this era, originally denoting roads maintained by highwaymen, the legal kind, not the masked robbers. What's most striking is how these roads reshaped society's very sense of distance. Before turnpikes, travel was so arduous that most people lived and died within 10 miles of their birthplace. After a new mobility took hold, carrying ideas as much as goods, the same roads that transported Welsh coal to London's factories also carried Enlightenment philosophies from city to countryside. In a very real sense, the modern world began not with steam engines or spinning jennies, but with the simple, radical idea that a well-maintained road could be a shared investment, one that paid dividends to entire communities. The next time you breeze through a toll plaza, remember, you're participating in an experiment that once changed the world. The Industrial Revolution didn't just introduce steam engines, it forced roads to reinvent themselves. For centuries, highways had been the undisputed kings of transport, but suddenly, iron tracks and belching locomotives promised to eclipse them. Yet something unexpected happened. Roads didn't vanish. Instead, they evolved into vital partners for the railway age, creating a symbiotic dance between old and new technologies that still defines how we move goods today. Picture the scene: horse-drawn wagons clattering over freshly macadamized roads to reach bustling rail depots, their loads transferred onto waiting freight cars. These weren't competitors, they were links in the same chain, each playing to its strengths. Trains could haul coal and cotton across continents at unprecedented speeds, but they couldn't deliver bolts of cloth to a Manchester factory or milk cans to a London doorstep. That's where roads stepped in, literally the last mile of a journey that might span thousands. The real innovation lay in the hubs. Rail stations became nerve centers where multiple transport modes converged, foreshadowing today's intermodal terminals. In Liverpool, the world's first elevated railway viaduct in 1836 didn't just carry trains. It arched over a maze of cobbled streets where carts waited to distribute goods. Across the Atlantic, Philadelphia's Baldwin Locomotive Works used a network of paved access roads to shuttle parts between specialized workshops, a precursor to modern just-in-time manufacturing. Even rural areas felt the shift. Farmers who once drove herds to distant markets now herded them to the nearest rail siding, where refrigerated cars, another revolution, awaited. Roads became capillaries feeding the railway's arteries, proving that progress isn't about one technology winning, but about how different systems amplify each other. This synergy sparked engineering breakthroughs. Traditional dirt tracks couldn't handle the heavier wagons needed to serve rail depots, so Scotsman John Macadam pioneered his famous macadam surfaces, layers of crushed stone compacted into a smooth, durable crust. His design drained rainwater efficiently and resisted rutting, allowing year-round access to railheads. Meanwhile, iron bridges replaced wooden ones to support increased loads, and toll gates adapted to charge by axle weight rather than passenger count. The infrastructure was literally recalibrating to serve a new era. The parallels to today's transport networks are striking. Just as 19th century roads fed rail hubs, modern highways funnel cargo into airports and seaports. The containerization revolution of the 1960s, where standardized boxes seamlessly shift from ship to train to truck, mirrors the palletized goods that once moved between horse carts and boxcars. Even the challenges remain familiar: congestion around intermodal terminals, debates over who pays for upkeep, and the eternal balance between speed and accessibility. What's most revealing is how these choices shaped urban landscapes. Cities like Chicago exploded outward along rail corridors, their growth patterns etched by the interplay of tracks and streets. Suburbs emerged around commuter stations, with roads radiating like spokes to connect them, a template still visible in metro areas worldwide. The Industrial Revolution taught us that transport isn't a zero-sum game. When roads and rails collaborate, they don't just move goods faster, they redraw the map of human settlement itself. The Autobahn wasn't just a highway, it was a propaganda tool wrapped in concrete. When Hitler's regime began construction in the 1930s, they sold it as a jobs program and a symbol of national unity. But beneath the rhetoric lay a startling engineering vision. Roads designed not for the clunky cars of the era, but for a future of high-speed travel. The curves were gentler, the sight lines longer, and the surfaces smoother than anything seen before. Unlike older roads that followed the natural contours of the land, the Autobahn sliced through hills and leaped over valleys with reinforced concrete viaducts, a deliberate echo of Rome's imperial disregard for geographic obstacles. Yet for all its sinister origins, the Autobahn's technical innovations were undeniable. Its split-grade interchanges, banked turns, and absence of speed limits became a blueprint for what highways could be. Across the Atlantic, American engineers took notes. General Dwight Eisenhower, stationed in Germany after World War II, marveled at how efficiently the Autobahn moved troops and supplies. That experience would later shape his push for the U.S. Interstate system in the 1950s, a network explicitly designed for both civilian travel and military logistics. The parallels were striking. Like the Autobahn, American interstates avoided sharp curves, incorporated median dividers for safety, and used thick, multi-layered pavements to handle heavy loads. But there was a key difference. Where the Autobahn had been a top-down project of dictatorship, the interstate system became a democratizing force, connecting small towns to urban hubs and fueling suburban growth. What's often overlooked is how both systems borrowed from ancient playbooks. The Autobahn's straightaways mirrored Roman roads' military efficiency, while the interstate system's numbering scheme, odd for north-south, even for east-west, echoed the orderly logic of imperial route markers. Even the materials told a story of continuity. Roman engineers had mixed volcanic ash into their concrete. 20th century builders used steel rebar and bitumen, but the goal was the same: roads that could outlast their creators. The legacy of these highways isn't just in their asphalt. They reshaped how societies experienced distance and time. A drive from Berlin to Munich that once took days could now be done in hours, collapsing the map just as Roman roads had shrunk their empire. The same transformation happened in America, where interstates turned regional economies into national ones. Yet for all their speed, these roads also created new divides. Neighborhoods were bisected, ecosystems disrupted, and the very concept of road trip culture emerged, a mix of freedom and fragmentation that still defines modern mobility. Perhaps the most ironic twist is how the Autobahn's DNA lives on in places its creators never imagined. China's expansive highway network, Brazil's BR-116, even Australia's Stuart Highway, all owe some debt to those 1930s German engineers. The lesson isn't about praising dark origins, but recognizing how infrastructure transcends its birth. Roads, whether built by empires or dictators, have a way of escaping their makers' intentions. They become stages for everyday life, commutes, vacations, truckers' radio chatter, proving that even the most politically charged pavement eventually belongs to the people who travel it. When President Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, he wasn't just paving roads, he was stitching together a nation with threads of concrete and ambition. The vision was staggering: 41,000 miles of interstate highways, linking cities and farms, coasts and heartlands, in a network so vast it could loop around the equator 1.5 times. But what's truly remarkable isn't just the scale, it's how eerily it echoed the strategic playbook of ancient Rome. Like the Appian Way 2,000 years before it, America's interstates were designed with dual purposes: to speed commerce and to move troops. Those long, straight stretches through the Nevada desert or across the Kansas plains, they weren't just about scenic drives, they were potential emergency runways for military aircraft, a Cold War contingency hidden in plain sight. The Roman parallels ran deeper than geopolitics. Just as Roman surveyors used Groma's ancient alignment tools to plot arrow-straight paths across Italy, American engineers leaned on new technologies like photogrammetry to chart the interstate's relentless courses. Both systems prioritized unimpeded flow over local geography, tunneling through mountains and bridging rivers rather than detouring around them. Even the materials whispered of continuity, where Roman laborers compacted volcanic ash into enduring pavement. 20th century crews mixed Portland cement and steel rebar, creating surfaces thick enough to support tanks. The goal was the same: roads that would outlast generations, binding territories together with unbreakable bonds. Yet the interstates didn't just mimic history, they rewrote it. Suddenly, a trucker could haul Georgia peaches to Chicago in a day, while a family could drive from New York to Florida without navigating a single stoplight. Suburbs exploded along exit ramps, their growth patterns mirroring the Roman towns that once clustered around imperial way stations. Drive-in restaurants, motels with neon signs, and sprawling shopping centers became the new caravanserais, catering to a mobile society. The very rhythm of American life accelerated, with roadside culture spawning everything from fast food to FM radio. But this revolution came at a cost. Historic neighborhoods were bulldozed for right-of-way, and main streets withered as traffic bypassed town centers. The same highways that united the nation also divided it, sometimes literally, as elevated interstates sliced through communities like concrete guillotines. Even the romance of the open road faded as interstates standardized travel, replacing quirky roadside attractions with identical gas stations and chain hotels. The contradictions were baked into the pavement. These were roads of both connection and separation, freedom and homogenization. What endures is the sheer transformative power these highways wielded. They didn't just change how Americans traveled, they changed how they lived, worked, and dreamed. The interstate system became the unseen skeleton of modern life, as essential as the electrical grid or the internet. And like the Roman roads before it, its legacy is measured not in miles, but in the countless lives rerouted by its unyielding path. Mohenjo-Daro wasn't just a city, it was a meticulously organized machine carved from brick and sunlight. 5,000 years ago, while much of the world was still nomadic, this Indus Valley metropolis boasted streets laid out in perfect right angles, with standardized brick sizes and an underground drainage system that would put some modern cities to shame. Every block was precisely measured, every intersection calculated for optimal flow. This wasn't just urban planning, it was geometry applied to human life, a masterclass in efficiency that predated Pythagoras by millennia. Fast forward to today, and you'll see that same grid logic in Manhattan's numbered streets, Barcelona's Eichsample district, and the relentless order of suburban subdivisions. The grid endures because it works, but somewhere along the way, we forgot the other half of the ancient recipe. Ancient cities understood something we're only now relearning. Density isn't the enemy. Walk through the ruins of Pompeii and you'll find apartment buildings 5 stories high, shops nestled against temples, and public squares within easy reach of every home. The average Pompeian walked less than 10 minutes to reach bakeries, baths, or theaters, a concept urbanists now call the 15-minute city. Compare that to modern sprawl, where a gallon of milk might require a 15-minute drive. The Romans packed their cities tight not out of necessity but by design. Narrow streets shaded buildings from the sun, mixed-use spaces reduced travel needs, and communal fountains meant no backyard hoses guzzling water. Every square foot served multiple purposes, creating a vibrant, walkable ecosystem. Yet post-war America embraced the opposite philosophy. Levittown's cookie-cutter houses and winding cul-de-sacs promised space and privacy, but at a hidden cost. The average American household now spends more on transportation than healthcare, thanks to car-dependent layouts. Ancient Athens could support a theater culture with 30,000 seats because people lived densely enough to walk there. Today's multiplexes require acres of parking lots. The environmental toll is staggering. Sprawl consumes farmland 20 times faster than population growth, while low-density suburbs generate up to 4 times more carbon emissions per capita than compact urban cores. But hope flickers in unexpected places. Barcelona's superblocks experiment where clusters of streets are repurposed as pedestrian zones directly borrows from the Roman insular concept of self-contained neighborhoods. Tokyo's transit-oriented development mirrors the way Roman baths and markets clustered around major road junctions. Even the tiny house movement echoes ancient efficiencies, proving you don't need McMansion square footage to live well. The past whispers a radical idea. Maybe progress doesn't mean spreading out, but building smarter within existing footprints. The irony is that our ancestors, lacking bulldozers and zoning laws, built more sustainably than we do with all our technology. Mohenjo-Daro's planners didn't have environmental impact studies, but their compact design naturally conserved resources. Medieval Siena's inward-tilting piazza collected rainwater without a single storm drain. These weren't accidents, they were wisdom baked into brick and stone. As climate change forces reckoning with our car-centric ways, the solutions might lie not in futuristic gadgets, but in dusting off 5,000-year-old blueprints. The grid was just the beginning. The real secret is remembering how to fill it with life. Athens' stoas weren't just shaded walkways. They were the ancient world's version of a bustling downtown sidewalk. These colonnaded promenades, like the famous Stoa Poikile, served as multipurpose arteries where philosophers debated, merchants haggled, and citizens strolled sheltered from the sun. Every element was calibrated for pedestrian comfort. The columns spaced just close enough to create rhythm, the roof overhang calculated to block midday heat, the stone benches positioned for spontaneous conversation. This wasn't incidental design, it was architecture in service of foot traffic, a recognition that cities thrive when they prioritize people over vehicles. Venice took this philosophy to poetic extremes. Its labyrinth of alleys and canals forced a slower, more intimate pace long before walkability became an urban planning buzzword. Without room for carts, Venetians developed a culture of shoulder-borne goods porters hauling everything from silk bolts to barrels of wine along passages barely wider than a doorway. The city's famed bridges weren't just crossings, they were natural gathering points, their stepped arches forcing pedestrians to pause and exchange news. Even the paving stones told a story, smoother trachyte for main routes where foot traffic was heaviest, rougher brick for quieter lanes to prevent slipping in rain. Every material choice whispered the same truth. This was a city built for souls, not wheels. Fast forward to today, and you'll spot this ancient wisdom resurfacing in unexpected ways. Copenhagen's Strøget, Europe's longest pedestrian street, transformed from a congested car corridor in the 1960s into a vibrant social hub, mirroring how Roman forums banned chariots during market hours. Barcelona's superblocks, where traffic is rerouted to create mini neighborhoods, consciously echo the contained, walkable quarters of medieval Siena. Even American suburbs, long dominated by cul-de-sacs, are rediscovering the value of alley-loaded garages and front porches that encourage sidewalk interaction, a nod to the sociable stoops of 19th century Brooklyn. The shift isn't just nostalgic, it's neurological. Studies show pedestrians experience cities in a fundamentally different way than drivers. Walking at 3 miles per hour, we notice shop window displays, catch snippets of conversation, make eye contact with strangers. At 30 miles per hour behind a windshield, those details blur into anonymity. Ancient builders understood this instinctively. The zigzag approach to Kyoto's Jin district, designed to slow samurai and prevent sword fights, accidentally created perfect window shopping sightlines. Florence's Vasari corridor, an elevated passage linking palaces, gave Medici rulers both privacy and a bird's-eye view of street life below. These weren't just functional paths, they were stages for human connection. Modern pedestrian zones reveal another timeless truth. When you design for feet, you design for serendipity. The limestone treads of Rome's Spanish steps have hosted everything from poetry readings to fashion photo shoots precisely because they invite lingering. Seoul's Cheonggyecheon stream, uncovered from decades of concrete in 2005, now draws 10 million visitors yearly to its car-free banks, proving that reclaiming space from vehicles can unlock unexpected civic joy. Even something as simple as Barcelona's bite the corner policy, shaving building edges to widen sidewalks, echoes the way Renaissance planners chamfered street corners to accommodate flowing crowds. The most radical return to ancient walkability might be the Dutch Woonerf, or living street, where pedestrians, cyclists, and cars share space at walking speed. With textured pavements and strategically placed planters forcing drivers to slow down, these zones resurrect the mixed-use chaos of pre-industrial streets, children playing next to delivery carts, cafe tables spilling onto shared surfaces. It's a far cry from the segregated lanes of modern highways, yet strikingly similar to the organic flow of Constantinople's Mies Avenue, where 4th century shoppers dodged both silk-laden camels and imperial processions. Beneath all these examples lies a quiet revolution in how we measure urban success. Ancient cities judged their streets by vibrancy, the smell of bread from corner ovens, the laughter echoing off close-set buildings. Somewhere in the automobile age, we swapped that for metrics like traffic throughput and parking capacity. Now, as cities from Paris to Portland remove asphalt to make room for parks and plazas, they're rediscovering an old formula. The best roads aren't those that move the most cars, but those that nurture the most life. The stones of Athens' Stoas and Venice's alleys still have lessons to teach if we're willing to walk slowly enough to listen. The Inca didn't just build bridges, they spun them from the very earth itself. High in the Andes, where gorges plunged thousands of feet, their engineers twisted tough iku grass into cables thicker than a man's torso, weaving them into suspension bridges that swayed like living things over deadly drops. These weren't static structures but dynamic ones, designed to flex with mountain winds and the tramping of llama caravans. Every year, communities gathered to renew them in a ritual that blended engineering with spirituality, unraveling old strands and braiding new ones in a cycle of collective care. The Spanish conquistadors, terrified of crossing these flimsy spans, failed to grasp their genius. The same flexibility that made them tremble was precisely what allowed the bridges to withstand earthquakes that would shatter rigid stone. Modern engineers studying these designs have found their tensile strength rivals steel cables, proving that advanced technology doesn't always mean heavy industry. Meanwhile, an ocean away, the Romans approached bridges as eternal monuments. Their stone arches, like the 29 spanning the Tagus River at Alcantara, weren't just functional, they were statements of imperial might. Each voussoir block was precisely cut to distribute weight downward into massive piers, a design so stable that some Roman bridges still carry traffic 2,000 years later. The secret lay in their understanding of compression forces. The arch's curve converted the deadly downward thrust of gravity into outward pressure, which sturdy abutments then absorbed. This wasn't just construction, it was applied physics centuries before the science was formally understood. The contrast between these two approaches reveals a deeper truth about infrastructure. The Inca worked with the land's rhythm, their organic materials blending into the landscape like extensions of the mountains themselves. The Romans sought to conquer geography, their geometric arches imposing order on unruly rivers. Yet both achieved the same end, turning barriers into connections. Fast forward to the Industrial Revolution, and iron then steel allowed spans previously unimaginable. The Brooklyn Bridge's steel cables, inspired by Inca principles but scaled to metropolis demands, married ancient suspension concepts with modern materials. Similarly, reinforced concrete arches in the 20th century echoed Roman forms while withstanding loads their creators never dreamed of. Today's bridges face new challenges: bigger ships beneath, heavier trucks above, and climate extremes testing their limits. Engineers are reviving ancient wisdom to meet them. Peru has reconstructed traditional rope bridges for rural communities, combining ancestral techniques with modern safety features. In Italy, carbon fiber reinforcements now strengthen aging Roman-style arches, blending millennia-old designs with space-age materials. The most poetic evolution might be in design philosophy. Where ancient builders saw bridges as sacred thresholds, the Incas' Apachita shrines marked each bridge's end. Modern architects increasingly treat them as social spaces. Copenhagen's Circle Bridge isn't just a crossing but a place to linger, with benches and bike lanes that echo the communal spirit of those Andean rope-weaving festivals. From grass fibers to steel alloys, the thread of human ingenuity remains unbroken. Whether spanning a Himalayan chasm or a Mississippi tributary, bridges still fulfill that primal urge to reach across divides, proving that while materials evolve, the desire to connect is timeless. The Tunnel of Eupalinos wasn't just a hole in the mountain, it was a geometric rebellion against nature's obstacles. Carved through solid limestone on the Greek island of Samos around 550 BC, this 1,100-meter passage solved a life or death problem, supplying water to a city under siege. But here's what stuns engineers. Even today, two teams dug from opposite ends, meeting almost perfectly in the middle without modern lasers or GPS. How? The mastermind Eupalinos employed a series of zigzagging survey trenches along the mountainside, aligning them with nothing more than ropes, plumb bobs, and an intuitive grasp of angles. The precision was staggering. Their margin of error amounted to just a few centimeters over half a mile of darkness. This wasn't just tunneling, it was the birth of a radical idea that humanity could redraw the map by going straight through what nature had put in the way. Centuries later, the Romans took tunnel engineering to new depths, literally. Their 36-kilometer Naumatia drainage tunnel beneath Lake Albano used vertical shafts to ventilate and remove debris, a technique still seen in modern subway construction. But it was the Persian qanats that turned tunneling into an art of survival. These gently sloping underground channels, some stretching 50 miles, tapped into mountain aquifers and delivered water to arid valleys without a single drop lost to evaporation. Villages flourished around their exit points, transforming deserts into breadbaskets. The real magic, they were dug entirely by hand, with workers using stars to maintain alignment and clay pipes to prevent collapses, an ancient version of today's tunnel boring machines and liner segments. Fast forward to the 19th century, and tunnels became battlegrounds between steam power and geology. The Mont Cenis tunnel through the Alps, completed in 1871, introduced pneumatic drills and dynamite tools that let crews chew through 9 meters of rock per day instead of the old pace of 9 centimeters. Yet even with these advances, the human cost was brutal. 4,000 workers labored in air so thick with silica dust that many died from stone eater's lung years later. The lesson was clear: ambition came at a price, one we're still reckoning with today. Modern engineering stands on these shoulders while leaping forward. Switzerland's Gotthard Base Tunnel, the world's longest at 57 kilometers, used robotic boring machines with disc cutters harder than the alpine rock they ground through. But its true innovation was environmental. 90% of excavated material was recycled into concrete, while ventilation systems mimicked the Persian qanats' passive cooling. Even more striking is Norway's submerged floating tunnels, where buoyant tubes will hang below fjords like underwater suspension bridges. These aren't just projects, they're philosophical statements that tunneling isn't about conquering nature, but collaborating with it. The legacy of these underground journeys is more than engineering. It's about reimagining limits. When workers broke through the final rock face of the Channel Tunnel in 1990, they didn't just connect Britain to France. They fulfilled a dream sketched by Napoleon and abandoned for 2 centuries. Today, as engineers plot tunnels for hyperloops and quantum communication cables, they're part of an unbroken chain. One that began with a Greek mathematician staring at a mountain and daring to ask, what if we go through instead of over? The answer reshaped continents. The road to Mecca isn't just a route. It's a river of faith flowing with millions of footsteps across centuries. Every year, pilgrims retrace the same paths walked by generations before them, their journey as much about the miles beneath their feet as the prayers on their lips. This is the Hajj, a pilgrimage that transforms ordinary roads into sacred corridors, where every rest stop and milestone carries spiritual weight. The ancient Darb Zubaydah, stretching 900 miles from Baghdad to Mecca, wasn't just a desert trail, it was a lifeline engineered for devotion. Caliph Zubaydah ordered wells dug every few miles, built shaded rest houses, and even paved sections with stones to ease the journey infrastructure as an act of worship. Today, modern highways overlay these same routes, their asphalt echoing with the whispers of camel caravans that once carried pilgrims under the same stars. Santiago de Compostela tells a different but equally profound story. The Camino's network of trails across Europe, marked by scalloped shells and yellow arrows, has guided pilgrims since the 9th century. What's remarkable isn't just its endurance, but its evolution. Medieval inns called hospitals offered free shelter to travelers, funded by noble families seeking spiritual merit. Stone bridges like Puente la Reina were constructed solely for pilgrims, their arches blending practicality with grace. Even the road surface itself became sacred. Worn-down stones bear grooves from countless staffs and shoes, a tactile record of devotion. Modern walkers still feel this legacy, whether staying in centuries-old monasteries or tracing rutted paths smoothed by a millennium of footsteps. Varanasi's Ghats reveal another dimension, roads as thresholds between worlds. Here, stone steps descend into the Ganges, each one a station for rituals spanning life's journey, from blessing newborns to cremating the dead. The pilgrim's circuit around the city mirrors the cosmic order, with every temple and alleyway part of a sacred geography. Unlike the linear Hajj or Camino, Varanasi's pathways spiral inward, drawing devotees toward enlightenment through motion. Even the chaos of its narrow lanes follows an ancient logic where cows, bicycles, and chanting processions share space in a dance choreographed by tradition. These pilgrimage routes share an invisible thread. They turn travel into transformation. Roman roads moved legions, Silk Road caravans moved goods, but sacred pathways moved the soul. Their engineering marvels, Persian caravanserais, Romanesque bridges, stepwells like India's Chand Bayori, were designed not just for efficiency but for transcendence. A pilgrim resting in the shade of a Moroccan ribat or a Japanese Shikoku temple isn't just escaping the sun, they're stepping into a story far larger than themselves. Modern infrastructure could learn from this holistic vision. Japan's Kumano-Kodo pilgrimage trails, now a UNESCO site, blend conservation with spirituality, maintaining ancient stones alongside eco-friendly signage. The Via Francigena, revived as a European cultural route, connects historic churches with sustainable tourism. These aren't museum pieces but living traditions, proving that roads can honor both heritage and progress. When a Spanish farmer still leaves water for Camino walkers or a Saudi volunteer serves dates to Hajj pilgrims, they're upholding a contract written in dust and devotion, that the journey matters as much as the destination. Perhaps that's the ultimate lesson of these sacred paths. In an age of bullet trains and overnight delivery, they remind us that some roads aren't meant to be rushed. Their value lies not in how quickly they're traveled, but in how deeply they're felt. Whether it's the whispered prayers on the stones of Jerusalem's Via Dolorosa or the synchronized footsteps of Cumb Mela's millions, pilgrimage routes endure because they satisfy a hunger no highway can quantify, the human need to walk, physically and spiritually, toward something greater. Colonial roads didn't connect communities, they conquered them. When European powers carved highways through Africa, Asia, and the Americas, their survey lines ignored ancient footpaths and sacred routes, slicing instead toward mines, plantations, and ports. In the Congo, Belgium's Route Nationale wasn't designed to link villages but to funnel rubber and ivory to the Atlantic, its straight lines betraying a brutal calculus. Every curve avoided meant faster profits. These weren't roads built for people, they were conveyor belts for extraction, paved with forced labor and flanked by watchtowers. The same pattern repeated from India's Grand Trunk Road, repurposed by the British to move troops and cotton, to the silver trails of Bolivia, where Spanish cobblestones still bear grooves from countless ore-laden carts. Infrastructure became a weapon of control, its very geometry enforcing colonial logic, resources out, soldiers in, yet resistance simmered in the margins. In Kenya, Kikuyu porters transformed supply routes into covert networks for Mau Mau rebels, using colonial roads to undermine colonial rule. Haitian Maroons, descendants of escaped slaves, navigated French-built plantations roads by moonlight to organize revolts. Even the famed Incan Cuhapacñan, co-opted by Spanish conquistadors, secretly preserved indigenous knowledge in the alignment of its stone markers. Roads meant to dominate became, paradoxically, tools of defiance, proof that infrastructure carries no inherent morality, only the intentions of those who wield it. The environmental toll was equally devastating. Where indigenous trails had followed natural contours, colonial engineers blasted through hills and drained swamps, triggering erosion and flooding. In Java, Dutch-built postwagon disrupted rice terraces' delicate water flow, causing famines. Australia's rabbit-proof fences, though not roads, functioned similarly, straight-line barriers that ignored Aboriginal songlines, fracturing ecosystems and cultures alike. The land itself rebelled. Colonial roads in Bengal exacerbated malaria by creating stagnant puddles, while Brazilian estradas accelerated Amazon deforestation centuries before bulldozers arrived. Today's maps still bear these scars. Nigeria's highway system radiates from Lagos like spokes, a relic of British cocoa and palm oil logistics. Bolivia's mining roads still pivot toward long-exhausted silver veins rather than modern cities. Even the U.S. highway system, celebrated for connecting coasts, originally prioritized agricultural and industrial corridors over Native American trade routes. The asphalt may be new, but the blueprint is old. Yet some communities are reclaiming these pathways. South Africa's Freedom Routes project overlays apartheid-era roads with stories of resistance, turning tarmac into testimony. In Canada, First Nations are restoring pre-contact portage trails as both cultural revival and climate resilience. Their winding paths better suited to wetland preservation than straight-shot highways. These efforts expose a profound truth. Roads aren't just about where we go, but who we've been and who we might become. The colonial shovel may have broken the earth, but the hands that reshape it can still choose healing over harm. The Inca didn't just build roads, they built conversations with the earth. High in the Andes, where torrential rains and landslides threatened to erase lesser paths, their engineers crafted highways that danced with the landscape instead of fighting it. Terraced steps cut into mountainsides slowed water's destructive rush, while drainage channels woven beneath stone surfaces redirected runoff with the precision of modern stormwater systems. These weren't static structures but living collaborations with nature designed to flex and adapt, a stark contrast to today's rigid asphalt ribbons that crack under extreme heat or wash away in floods. As climate change turns once reliable weather patterns into chaos, the Incas' reverence for terrain holds urgent lessons. Their roads didn't just survive the elements, they thrived because of them. Take their use of local materials, a practice modern engineers are now rediscovering in the face of supply chain vulnerabilities. Inca builders sourced stones from nearby slopes, fitting them without mortar so earthquakes would jostle the blocks harmlessly apart rather than shattering rigid pavement. In Peru's Sacred Valley, modern highway crews have adopted this technique, stacking loose stone embankments called gavianes to stabilize landslide-prone stretches. The result, roads that behave like the Incas, shifting slightly during tremors but never collapsing. Meanwhile, in the Netherlands, engineers are testing sponge roads inspired by ancient terracing, where porous surfaces absorb floodwaters like the stepped agricultural fields of the Andes. But the Incas' genius extended beyond materials. Their roads were climate sensors long before satellites. By aligning routes with natural wind corridors and sunlight patterns, they minimized snowdrifts in winter and maximized shade in summer. Modern designers are mirroring this with cool pavement experiments in cities like Los Angeles, where light-colored coatings reflect heat, a high-tech echo of the Incas' light-hued stone surfaces that stayed cooler than dark asphalt. Even their iconic rope bridges, swaying gracefully over raging rivers, offer a model for modern flexi bridges that rise with floodwaters instead of resisting them. The most profound insight might be their systemic thinking. Where modern infrastructure often treats roads as isolated ribbons, the Inca saw them as part of a larger hydrological web. Their highways doubled as water management systems, with culverts feeding irrigation channels that nourished crops downhill. Today's most forward-thinking projects, like China's sponge cities, aim for this same integration, designing streets to store and filter rainwater for reuse. It's a shift from combating nature to collaborating with it, a philosophy etched into every stone of the Quihapak Nyan. As temperatures soar and storms intensify, the past isn't just offering nostalgia, it's offering survival tools. Dutch engineers studying Inca techniques have revived ancient contour following road alignments to reduce erosion in Bangladesh's floodplains. Arizona transportation planners are testing self-healing concrete infused with bacteria, inspired by the Incas' use of organic binders. Even the humble cobblestone is making a comeback in flood-prone areas, its gaps allowing water to permeate where sealed asphalt would fail. These aren't regressions, they're evolutions, blending ancestral wisdom with cutting-edge science. The irony is poignant. Centuries after colonizers dismissed indigenous engineering as primitive, climate chaos is forcing a reckoning. From the Andes to the Alps, the roads that endure aren't the ones that dominate the landscape, they're the ones that listen to it. Asphalt may have won the 20th century, but the 21st belongs to a new old paradigm, infrastructure that doesn't just withstand the storm, but learns from the whispers of those who built before the storm came. The Romans chiseled distances into stone mile markers along their highways, turning every road into a ledger of empire. These simple slabs didn't just tell travelers how far they'd come, they were the first data points in an unbroken chain of infrastructure intelligence. Fast forward 2,000 years, and the asphalt beneath your tires hums with a far more sophisticated conversation. Modern smart roads are embedded with fiber optic sensors that monitor traffic flow, detect potholes before they form, even communicate with autonomous vehicles to optimize speed and spacing. What began as chiseled stone has evolved into a digital nervous system, where every vibration and temperature shift becomes actionable information. Take South Korea's smart highway between Seoul and Incheon, where glowing LED lane markers change color to warn drivers of fog or ice ahead. A high-tech descendant of the flaming beacons Persian couriers used to signal danger along the Royal Road. Or consider Nevada's stretch of Interstate 80, where piezoelectric crystals embedded in the pavement harvest energy from passing trucks, converting vibrations into electricity to power streetlights. These innovations aren't just futuristic gimmicks, they're the latest chapter in an ancient story. When Mongol messengers placed arrow-shaped stones at crossroads to indicate direction, they were creating primitive navigation algorithms. Today's GPS-enabled highways, dynamically rerouting cars based on real-time congestion data, fulfill that same purpose with quantum computing. The real revolution lies in how these roads learn. In the Netherlands, solar-powered smart bike paths coated with temperature-sensitive paint reveal hidden ice patches by changing color. Much like Inca engineers read mountain weather patterns to anticipate landslides. Barcelona's sensor-laden streets adjust streetlight brightness based on pedestrian movement, echoing the way Roman oil lamps once flickered to life along busy night routes. Even the humble traffic cone has gone digital. AI-equipped versions in Singapore analyze accident scenes and transmit damage assessments to emergency crews before they arrive. Yet for all their microchips, smart roads still grapple with age-old dilemmas. Privacy concerns mirror the suspicion medieval travelers felt when toll collectors recorded their passage. Cybersecurity threats recall the vulnerability of Silk Road caravans to bandit attacks, and the digital divide risks creating transportation haves and have-nots, much like how Roman roads primarily served military and elite traffic. The lesson: technology changes, but infrastructure's deepest questions endure. Who benefits? Who controls the data? How do we balance innovation with equity? The most poetic twist might be how these digital highways are rediscovering ancient wisdom. California's smart freeways use swarm logic, where individual vehicles communicate like ants to reduce congestion, a principle eerily similar to the self-organizing flow of camel caravans on the Silk Road. Meanwhile, Berlin's energy-generating sidewalks, which harvest footstep vibrations, operate on the same physics as the Kanat tunnels that powered Persian water clocks. The past and future aren't just connected, they're in constant dialogue. As we stand on the brink of roads that charge electric cars wirelessly or melt snow autonomously, it's worth remembering that the smartest infrastructure has always been adaptive. Whether it's a Roman surveyor aligning a road with the stars or a neural network predicting traffic patterns, the goal remains unchanged: to make the journey safer, smoother, and more connected. The stones may now be silicon, but the road's purpose, to inform as well as transport, hasn't budged an inch. The Silk Road didn't just transport silk, it carried entire worldviews in the saddlebags of its traders. When Buddhist monks hitched rides with merchant caravans from India to China, they weren't just passengers, they were cultural couriers, translating sutras into local languages at oasis towns along the way. By the time these teachings reached the Tang dynasty capital of Chang'an, they'd mingled with Taoist philosophy and Central Asian art, birthing entirely new schools of thought like Chan Buddhism. This wasn't just religious exchange, it was intellectual alchemy, where roads became crucibles for ideas as much as for commerce. Food tells the same story of delicious transformation. The humble noodle likely traveled west from China to Italy, morphing into pasta as it absorbed Mediterranean wheat and olive oil. Meanwhile, Persian saffron and Indian pepper seasoned Roman banquets, while Central Asian fermentation techniques gave birth to everything from Korean kimchi to German sauerkraut. These weren't just imported ingredients, they were edible dialogues, with each mile of road adding new flavors to the recipe. Even the ubiquitous chili pepper, now synonymous with Thai curries and Hungarian goulash, only left the Americas after Columbus, blazing a trail along colonial trade routes to rewrite culinary identities worldwide. Music and fashion rode these same highways. The two humped camels of the Silk Road carried not just bolts of silk, but the very concept of fashion seasons, introducing Chinese courtiers to Persian dyes and Byzantine embroidery. Centuries later, Route 66 would fuel a different kind of style revolution. The rockabilly blues of African-American musicians migrating west blended with country twang to create rock and roll, its beat echoing in truck stops and roadside diners. The British invasion that followed, just another loop in the cultural feedback as American blues traveled back across the Atlantic on vinyl records, only to return amplified by Liverpool bands. Language itself is a road's living legacy. Swahili, the lingua franca of East Africa, grew from centuries of Arab traders mixing Bantu grammar with Arabic loanwords along coastal routes. English absorbed everything from Viking curses to Hindi numerals thanks to the crisscrossing paths of invaders and merchants. Even slang travels the modern interstate system. Southern hip-hop vernacular migrates north via highway-connected cities, while California surfer lingo catches waves across the continent. The most profound exchanges often happened in the margins. Rest stops along ancient routes became accidental universities, where Greek geometry met Indian astronomy under the shade of caravanserai courtyards. Today's truck stops and highway diners serve similar roles. Tex-Mex cuisine was born when Mexican cooks adapted recipes for truckers' tastes, while jazz standards evolved as musicians played for cross-country travelers in Chicago and Kansas City rail hubs. Digital highways now accelerate these collisions. K-pop beats hitch rides on fiber optic cables instead of camel trains, going viral in Sao Paulo as quickly as in Seoul. TikTok trends spread like wildfire along the invisible roads of algorithms, proving that while the vehicles change, the velocity of cultural exchange only grows. Yet the pattern remains unchanged, whether it's 8th century monks or 21st century influencers. Roads have always been the silent partners in humanity's endless remix of ideas. The next time you bite into a taco al pastor, a Lebanese-Mexican fusion born from migrant routes, or hum a blues riff that crossed the Atlantic twice, remember, you're tasting and hearing the legacy of roads that refused to let the world stay separate. From stone to asphalt, from footpaths to freeways, roads are humanity's enduring signature on the landscape. They're more than just pathways. They're the silent witnesses to our collective journey, bearing the weight of empires, the whispers of pilgrims, and the hum of modern commuters. Ancient engineers couldn't have imagined highways stretching across continents or tunnels burrowing beneath oceans, yet their innovations laid the literal groundwork for the world we navigate today. The Romans' layered roads, the Incas' gravity-defying suspension bridges, the Silk Road's sprawling web of trade, these weren't just feats of engineering. They were acts of faith in connectivity, in the idea that distances could be conquered and cultures intertwined. As we stand on the brink of a new era with roads that charge electric vehicles, smart highways that communicate with self-driving cars, and materials that heal their own cracks, we do well to listen to the whispers of the past. The Inca built for flexibility, knowing the earth shifts and storms come. The Persians prioritized speed, understanding that information moves empires. The Romans engineered for permanence, their roads outlasting the legions that marched on them. These aren't archaic concepts, they're timeless principles waiting to be rediscovered. Imagine a future where our highways, like the qanats of Persia, work in harmony with nature, where urban streets reclaim the walkable vitality of Athenian stowers, where bridges flex like Andean grass ropes in the face of climate chaos. The blueprint isn't locked in some high-tech lab, it's buried in the very roads we've walked for millennia. So the next time you're stuck in traffic or racing down an open highway, look down. Beneath those layers of asphalt and paint lies a hidden conversation between past and future. Every pothole patched with recycled plastic echoes the Roman practice of mixing volcanic ash into concrete. Every solar-powered streetlight winks at the oil lamps that once lit the Appian way. Roads don't just take us places, they remind us where we've been and who we are. The journey isn't over, it's evolving, with each generation adding its own layer to the story. If this trip through time has shifted how you see the pavement beneath your feet, hit like, because history isn't just in textbooks, it's under your tires. And if you're curious about the other hidden threads connecting past and present, subscribe to keep exploring. The road ahead is long, and the best discoveries often lie where ancient wisdom meets tomorrow's innovations. Where will your next turn